Okay, the second part of 11 is the discussion of an action on motion to disqualify Commissioner Sheehan from all proceedings involving former Chief Louis Kealoha, U.S. D.C. Civil Number 16-00659, and it's submitted by Kevin Sumida, who is here today. So what I'd like to do, Kevin, is that say a few words, and then I will allow Commissioner Sheehan to also say a few words in rebuttal.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman and Madam Vice Chairman, Commission members, I think the Commission has received a copy of my letter brief, which I filed yesterday with the Commission. In addition, for the convenience of the Commissioners, I have brought copies of the relevant statutes, which I have cited in my letter of yesterday. And it's very clear that, and I can make it available, it's very clear that the statute requires, the law requires, that commissioners act as a body. They are prohibited from acting and conducting their own private investigations. They must investigate as a body, they must deliberate as a body, they must decide as a body. And there is evidence that Commissioner Sheehan has violated the law by performing her own personal investigations of Chief Kealoha, by talking to witnesses, by attending and observing proceedings, and then by speaking to other people at these proceedings and identifying herself as a police commissioner. All of these actions may constitute a violation of the law, a crime. Now, the Commission has been given power to investigate. The Commission has the power to issue subpoenas, and I would call upon the Commissioners to investigate this matter, to give Commissioner Sheehan a full and fair investigation of this. But in the meantime, pending that investigation, she should be disqualified from considering any matter involving Chief Kealoha, the very subject of her personal investigation. So this is something I feel is very important. I think the Commissioners have a duty, a legal obligation, to present not only not only be impartial, but to present the appearance of impartiality, and that is not occurring as long as Commissioner Sheehan participates in these discussions. So beyond that, we stand by our written submissions, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Okay. Any questions of Mr. Sumida?
I have some.
Yeah.
Also, as far as personally concerned, Mr. Sumida can sit unless he prefers to stand. This is a court.
I'm standing. I apologize. I feel very strange.
Okay. What investigations by the Commission as a body do you have in mind? I mean, what is your impression as to what the nature of Commission investigations is?
In general, or as I have requested?
In general. In the context of requests for legal representation and contested case hearings that result.
I don't request that there be investigation as to our request for legal representation. What I feel the investigation must consist of is a review of whether or not a member of your commission has violated the law, committed a crime, by conducting a personal investigation.
I don't think I'm making myself clear. You seem to be taking issue with what you characterize as investigation which Commissioner Sheehan has undertaken on her own, as distinguished from investigations by the Commission as a body regarding Chief Kealoha.
Yes.
My question to you is, what is it that you believe the Commission does as a body by way of investigation?
You know, I'm not sure. I don't think the statute is perfectly clear on that. But
Well, I can tell you that the Commission as a body, if by that you mean the commissioners collectively acting in concert, engage in no investigation whatsoever.
I'm not following. I think I'm understanding you to say that the commission as a body cannot perform any investigation?
I'm saying as an empirical fact, with respect to requests for legal representation pursuant to sections 52D8 and 9, no investigation is conducted by the commission as a body, meaning by the commissioners collectively as 6 or 7 commissioners. So what is it that you are suggesting that the commission ought to be doing?
Investigate whether or not a member of this commission has violated the law.
That isn't the context in which you raised the matter just now. You were distinguishing between what you are alleging Commissioner Sheehan as an individual member has done improperly that should have been done by the commission collectively, or did I mishear you?
I'm not suggesting that the commission as a whole should have done anything, but if it will be doing it, it has to do it as a body. And if an individual member of the commission decides to do this investigation on his or her own, that is illegal, and is grounds for a summary disposition.
And you believe that Commissioner Sheehan has individually investigated the merits of Chief Kealoha's request for legal representation pursuant to the statutes?
No. I'm suggesting that the issue of Chief Kealoha's request for representation is part of a larger picture. As I pointed out in my opening letter brief, it is clear to us that Commissioner Sheehan is not impartial, that she has made up her mind, and in connection with that, has decided on her own to engage in a personal investigation which is in violation of the law. These things which we show to the commission is evidence of the fact that she is not partial, she is not impartial, and she should be disqualified. But aside from that, because there is evidence that she did violate the law by conducting a personal investigation, we feel that the commissioners have an obligation to investigate that and to determine whether or not such a law violation has occurred.
To maybe put a finer point on it, what is it that you believe Commissioner Sheehan has done that bears upon her capacity to be impartial with respect to Chief Kealoha's entitlement to legal representation pursuant to sections 52D, 8, and 9?
I believe that question is too narrowly defined. I believe that Commissioner Sheehan has shown that she is not impartial with respect to anything involving Chief Kealoha.
And from that you infer that by virtue of that partiality, Commissioner Sheehan would be hostile to the Chief's request for legal representation pursuant to the statute?
She might be, but at the very least there is the appearance of impropriety in her participating in any such discussion. Now, if I can give the Commission an example, the fact that a judge has made an untoward observation about a party in another case might very well be basis for that party, that judge to be recused in a totally different case, having expressed bias towards that party. So to phrase the question as, what is the bias with respect to the specific case that the comment was not made, to me is too narrow a question. The question is whether or not the person who is exercising the judicative role has expressed a bias against the person whose rights she is adjudicating.
Are you completing your questioning, Commissioner? You're not complete yet?
No, I am.
Oh, okay.
I'm just curious. So your contention that Commissioner Sheehan is biased by what you read in the papers, or what, if you have any facts that maybe because you want us to handle this situation of which we will vote upon So you have any facts for us? or-
Yes, we've presented a series of facts in our first letter brief to the commission. It's quite extensive. We've attached newspaper articles and other things which quote her and which indicate her bias. Now again, you may very well conclude that she's not biased. We would disagree with that, but that does not end the discussion, because the question is not only whether she is in fact biased, but whether or not she gives the appearance of bias. Because when a adjudicatory body makes a decision under circumstances where they are giving the appearance of bias, that is also improper, and that requires recusal as well. Now in this case, we're thinking that we feel that we've raised enough questions as to whether or not any legal act has taken place, and that the commission should investigate. And pending that investigation, she should be recused. But even if the commission chooses not to conduct an investigation, there is still the issues that we raised in our opening letter, which is there is at least the appearance of bias, and for that reason alone, she should not be allowed to participate.
Okay, before I turn it over to Commissioner Sheehan, I have a question. So Kevin, if I were to, one of your, in your documents, you mentioned about her, Commissioner Sheehan showing up at the hearing at the federal court. I was thinking about going too, just to observe. Would that, you think that would disqualify me?
The statute prohibits conducting any personal investigation.
No, it was just, it wasn't an investigation, I just curiosity, just to see, what happens. Would that disqualify me? Based on what you're saying, it would.
It might very well disqualify you, yes. Okay. Now, you might decide that that is not the case. I would say, look, when you are in an official position and you attend a matter outside of these proceedings, which relate to the very thing that you are having to consider as a commissioner, then you have to be very careful to say, well, I'm going to go to that thing as a private individual, because you cannot separate that from the fact that whatever you learn in that proceeding is going to be used when you come and decide the matter as a commissioner.
Yeah, well, I think I'm in all my years I've always been known to be fair, and I think I can separate myself in those type of situations, but that's just about how I feel.
And I don't question that. But again, it's not just merely a question of being fair, but it's a question of giving the appearance of being fair as well. That generates confidence, public confidence in your proceedings, and it preserves the integrity of your proceedings.
So we should be monks then and close to ourselves.
With respect to matters that are within your kuriana, I think you have to be more circumspect, yes.
Okay, we have...
I do have another question. You probably know, because it was covered in the media, that I attended former Officer Niall Silva's change of plea proceeding in the federal court, which he tendered guilty pleas and which pleas were accepted by the court with respect to particular misconduct with which he was charged. That was former Officer Silva, not Chief Kealoha. Is it your position that my presence at that public proceeding therefore casts doubt on my capacity to be fair and impartial with respect to your client's request?
Number one, you haven't expressed the personal comments that we have quoted Commissioner Sheehan, which justify her recusal. On the issue of your attendance at a proceeding outside the presence of a commission hearing, to the extent that that has any bearing on what this commission does, would be a personal investigation. We believe that that is not consistent with the law.
I don't know if this gives you any reassurance or not, but from my perspective, the substance of former Officer Silva's proceeding, in my mind, has no relation whatsoever with the merits of your client's request for legal representation pursuant to 52D8 and 9. Every request is different. Officer Silva, I don't know whether he made such a request or not with us, because I wasn't on the commission yet. But his change of plea doesn't have anything to do, in my mind, with the merits of Chief Kealoha's request.
Okay, since we all done saying what we need to say, the floor is yours, Commissioner Sheehan.
Thank you, Chair. Kevin, you sure you don't want to sit down?
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay. So I wanted to ask you about your accusation specifically that I had broken the law, that I had committed criminal offenses. And I want to ask you, am I understanding you correctly that you believe I broke the law by going to federal court on December 16th, 2016? Is that your position?
My position is that that is an indication that you may have broken the law, yes.
And so you agree that federal court is a public courthouse, right?
Yes.
And you agree that I have a constitutional right to attend proceedings in the federal courthouse, correct?
Yes.
And we agree that your objection to me being an adjudicator is in the context of a contested case hearing, correct? Okay. And the hearing that I attended, as I said, was December 16th, 2016, is that correct?
I believe that's one of them, yes.
Yes. And Chief Kealoha didn't request a contested case hearing until 3 months after I went to court, correct? On March 10th of 2017, is that correct?
Okay.
Is that correct?
Let's assume that's true.
I have paperwork, would you like to see it?
No, I accept that that's true.
Okay, so what you're alleging is that I was doing an investigation of a matter that had not yet come into being, is that correct?
No.
You're alleging that I broke the law by going to federal court in December, and he didn't apply for a contested case hearing until March. That's
From the day you were appointed, you have made it very clear that you have it out for Chief Kealoha.
I would really appreciate it if you would answer my questions, and then you can answer.
That is an answer to your question.
Okay, so my question was, and maybe you didn't hear it, my question was, you're accusing me of breaking the law by going to court in December of 2016 because you believe I was investigating a contested case hearing.
No.
When that contested case hearing did not, the application was not made until March of 2017, 3 months later.
My allegation is that you broke the law, or you may have broken the law, by attending these federal proceedings in your quest to get Chief Kealoha out. Okay? This is all part of an expression of your bias against him, a bias which you have expressed from the very first day of your appointment. That bias continues to today, and it'll spill over into this limited matter of our request for representation. That doesn't mean that we're saying you're biased only with respect to this limited matter. You have been biased from the day that you were appointed.
So, is it against the law for me to read the newspaper about Chief Kealoha?
Let me answer it this way. When you go to, you're a trial lawyer, you've gone to trial many times. When a jury is deciding a matter, they are told they cannot read the paper. They cannot go to the site to make an inspection. They must consider only that which is part of the adjudicatory proceedings that they are deciding. They cannot go outside of the record. But you have done that by going outside of the record and considering matters which pertain to Chief Kealoha. That's what makes it improper.
So, because I have read the newspaper to consider matters outside of the record, that means I'm biased.
You've done more than that.
Answer my question.
No,
because,
I'm not saying that.
I'm focusing on the newspaper and we'll get to everything else. Please answer my question.
Your question is whether the reading of the newspaper makes you biased?
Correct.
It has made you biased, yes.
Okay? So for all of us here, if we read the newspaper, then that's an improper act.
No,
It's an
what I'm
act
saying,
that demonstrates bias.
no, in your case, what I'm saying is that you read the newspaper, didn't do any further investigation with the commission, didn't ask the commission to do a further investigation, and then decided, based only upon what you read in the newspaper, that the chief has to go.
Well, that's your personal belief. Is there a place that you can point to that I said the chief has to go?
Start from your very first speech when you became commissioner.
Okay, that I had concerns? Are you equating the statement that I had concerns with Chief Kealoha has to go?
When you equate the chief with a horrible act in history, the Massey case, yes, you already made up your mind. The case, by the way, that has no relevance to this, a case which any Hawaiian, I think, who heard you make that reference, would be outraged that you made a reference like that. You know, it's a reference to the Massey case, which is, I think, most people would find that to be, most people who know about the Massey case will know that is an outrageous comment.
Let's leave race out of it for a second,
You
Kevin.
brought it into this
And
thing by
let's leave race
referring
out
to
of
the
it.
Massey
So
case.
you agree that the Massey case was a terrible injustice?
It was a horrible
And
injustice.
you agree
yes.
that the Massey case involved one human being being framed by other human beings?
It was much more than that.
Was that part of it?
It was much more than that, but it was part of it, yes.
Okay. And so you agree that the allegations that are haunting former Chief Kealoha involve the accusation that a human being was framed by the Kealohas.
And that's
Is that
why you're
correct?
taking that case and taking it all out of context, because it was much more to the Massey case than that.
It's the
It involved the fact that there was a powerful race that was in charge of Hawaii at the time, that justice didn't matter to them, it only mattered to people who were in power.
And that was the lesson we learned, right? That you actually have to respect the legal process, correct?
Yes, and did you learn that lesson in the way you have conducted this
Okay,
investigation?
excuse me, can we focus on the issue that you wrote in your letter?
Yes.
And Commissioner, if we can
So I want
have
to know,
just a couple more questions and let's
Sure.
proceed.
in your accusation, if you did any research in the law. Did you?
I don't understand your question. I'm
When you
giving you
wrote
the
your
legal.
letter and you made your statement accusing me of breaking the law, did you do any legal research?
I cited you the statutes which show the basis
this-
for accusation.
And the statute you say that I violated was the one that establishes the structure for permitted interaction with members of PIG, correct?
All right.
Is that correct?
That's 19-2.5?
Yes.
Yes.
And that's the statute you're alleging I'm breaking.
Which we have living that you may have broken, yes.
Okay. And that says that a board may assign people to a PIG, is that correct?
Yes.
And that statute does not say that the only way board members may obtain information is through a mandatory PIG, is that correct?
So you're interpreting this as saying that you can be doing your own personal investigations? Because
I'm asking you a question.
well, I'd like to know whether or not you feel that you didn't violate the law and that you use this statute as a basis for concluding that you can conduct a personal investigation.
I'll cut to the chase. In 2013, the State of Hawaii Office of Information Practices released an opinion regarding the Sunshine Law, and specifically regarding the statute that you allege I broke. The Sunshine Law only applies to boards and their discussions, deliberations, decisions, and actions. Because the Sunshine Law does not apply to a board member's communications with people who are not members of a covered board, a member may discuss board business with people who are not board members outside of a meeting without needing to fall into one of the permitted interactions. Board members, therefore, can talk freely or otherwise communicate with citizens concerned about a particular issue, reporters, lobbyists, board or agency staff, other government officials, and the general public. Did you read that before you made your accusation of me, Mr. Sumida?
What I did was I said that you have to do, the commission should look into whether or not you violated the law. And if you think that that is a sufficient defense to what you have done, then I welcome that you raise it with the commission. But in the meantime, I think that we have raised enough of a question as to your bias and as to what you are willing to do in furtherance of your bias or your perceived bias, that you should not be allowed to participate in any further matters involving Chief Kealoha.
It's not
Okay,
done.
all right.
I'm going to give you a copy of this. You can regardless of the maybe before the.
Okay, thank you both for that exchange. But after reading all the stuff all the paperwork that's been submitted, I believe that the standard of conduct has not been, in other words, any violation has not occurred because the standard of conduct, based on what I've seen, has not been violated. So I don't believe that Commissioner Sheehan needs to recuse herself from any proceedings.
Thank you, Chair.
Any comments?
Are you doing that in the form of a motion?
No, there's no
Just
motion
make-
needed.
okay,
No
okay,
motion needed.
all right.
It's just that,
Okay.
that's the, okay? Any questions? Thank you, everyone, for participating, and moving on.
But just point of inquiry here, have we made it,
Okay.
are we being asked to make a decision?
No,
or-
no, I'm not,
We're not.
not asking.
We're not.
But Corp Counsel would suggest that I make a, okay, hope I get this right. Okay, I guess a motion needs to be made granting.
So moved.
Yeah, right, well, let me,
Okay,
explain.
you may, but
That, yeah, that's what I thought. That's what I, no motion. Haha.
Okay, all right,
No motion
Chair.
is needed
All right.
on the motion to disqualify Commissioner Sheehan. So she's able to participate in the Kealoha when it does come up.
Well, I think we're skipping at least one step.
What?
On behalf of his client, Mr. Sumida has asked this commission to make a decision.
Yeah.
And the decision that he's asking the commission to make is whether Commissioner Sheehan will be permitted to participate in the contested case hearing if she does not first recuse herself from participation in the contested case hearing. And I don't think your expression of your personal opinion or point of view
Yeah, it was
gets
not.
us there.
It was not. Anyway, but I believe Commissioner Sheehan did say that she would not recuse herself. Am I correct?
I haven't said anything.
Oh, I thought earlier, a couple of meetings ago, that you had mentioned that.
Well, what
Oh,
is-
so I guess
I want to know the intention.
All right, before,
Mr.
okay, before we,
Commissioner, sorry.
before we go on, Dwayne, if you don't mind taking the seat and get us through this procedurally.
We responded to a request from the commission with respect to Mr. Sumida's request. And the question that came to our office was whether the allegations contained in the May 30th letter from Mr. Sumida was sufficient to find that Commissioner Sheehan had violated the city's standard of conduct. And based on our review of that letter, we found that there was no violation of the standard of conduct. The second question that we were not asked to is whether the allegations contained in the letter was sufficient to show that Commissioner Sheehan should disqualify herself because of bias. We did not answer that question, and we believe that Commissioner Sheehan should be able to respond to that question alone. But with respect to voting, as Commissioner Levinson indicated, I think you can vote on the fact that Commissioner Sheehan, based on our recommendation, and you don't have to follow our recommendation, that she did not, the allegations contained in the May 30th letter does not amount to a violation of the standard of conduct, and the city's standard of conduct would not prevent her from participating in the contested case.
So the first order is to ask Commissioner Sheehan if she would recuse herself.
Well, the bias question is for Commissioner Sheehan to decide whether she believes she can be impartial or not. And I do point out, with respect to some of the comments, that we did list the list of duties and responsibilities of the commission, and one of the duties and responsibility of the commission is to actually review the chief and the department, and it would be difficult for and the commission with that respect, the commission wears many hats. The commission acts as a judicatory board in 52 D 8 and 9, as well as an overseeing body of the police department, and being critical in one sense of the chief or the department would not, we believe, would not necessarily disqualify a commissioner in another sense. So we would recommend that you vote that Commissioner Sheehan actions did not violate the standard of conduct and disqualify her from.
Okay, but first, I need to ask her to?
I think you should do that first. And
Okay.
then you should ask the commissioner whether she believes that she can be fair and impartial.
Okay. Oh.
I agree with Mr. Pang's recommendation. Looking at Mr. Sumida's initial letter of May 30, 2017, coming up on 6 months ago, in which he asks us to accept the letter as his formal request that Commissioner Sheehan recuse herself from consideration of any matter involving Chief Kealoha, and if she will not do so, that she be disqualified by the Commission from participating in any such matter. So what he has asked us, he's asked two things. He's asked first that Commissioner Sheehan take a position in her own right, and if her decision is not to recuse herself, then he's asking the Commission to disqualify.
Okay, so procedurally, let's proceed that way. So I guess the question would be to you, Commissioner Sheehan, is if you're going to disqualify yourself.
I am not going to disqualify myself. From the day I took this job, the well-being of the Honolulu Police Department has been, and of the public, has been in the forefront of my mind and has been my sole motivation. I want to assure everyone, and I am willing to listen to different voices, as I did with Mr. Sumida, that I was never out to get anyone, and I still am not out to get anyone. I always expressed my concerns openly, because I think open dialogue is the best way to improve our government. Open democracy is the best way for public input. Behind closed backroom doors, special groups that are hidden from the light, that is not the way to conduct business. When I had concerns, when I had questions, I said them out loud so that they could be answered in a fair and public manner. I hid nothing. I used publicly available documents. I used indictments. I used public preliminary hearing transcripts. I used documents that I obtained from publicly filed lawsuits. There were no secrets here. Again, I wasn't out to get anyone. I was out to ask legitimate questions, concerns that I had regarding the operation of the police department. And when it came to Chief Kealoha deciding that he wanted to resign, I actually didn't want him to resign. I actually wanted to have a hearing. I actually wanted to have, I laid out my concerns. That was shared with everybody. These are the questions I want to ask him. And maybe Chief Kealoha had very good answers. And maybe he should have stayed chief. I don't know. We never had that hearing. So I don't mean to pontificate and go on and on. But I do not believe that asking questions, I do not believe that reading the newspaper, I do not believe that speaking with the men and women of the Honolulu Police Department who have called me, emailed me, talked to me on the street, I do not believe that reflects bias. I believe that reflects a duty to my job here and to the police department and to the police commission. And so I am offended by the suggestion that I have broken the law by going to court. I am offended that I have broken the law by asking questions. And I will not recuse myself.
Okay, with that, Dwayne, the proper motion would be to,
That we should vote on whether she
yeah,
stays.
so make a motion to accept,
The motion would be to find that Commissioner Sheehan has
Okay,
not violated
to find, that's-
city standard
okay.
conduct, and she may participate in the
Okay.
upcoming hearing.
open
Yeah.
open to the motion.
I'd like to move in this form.
Okay,
I move that the commission find that Chief Kealoha, through counsel Mr. Sumida, has not set forth any basis for disqualifying Commissioner Sheehan from consideration of Chief Kealoha's request for legal representation pursuant to sections 52D8 and 9.
okay. Motion's been made, second?
I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? Okay, motion carried.
Recuse.
Thank you.